So, here's a common thing that I hear all the time. The United States won the First World War. Have you ever heard that or repeated that myth yourself?
Of course.
Tim hasn't, because he actually knows about World War I. But the rest of us kind of fall victim to that. And I always see on the 4th of July, you go to like the rodeos or the parades or wherever you're at, some patriotic gathering. There's that guy that has the shirt that says, America, back-to-back World War champs, right? Who's seen that shirt? If you have that, before you purchase that and wear that in public, you might want to pay attention today, because one of the big questions is, first of all, why didn't we get into this war right away? Why did we change our mind and jump in at the end? And then finally, what impact did we have on the war? Like, did we really win the war or not? So we're going to seek to answer those three questions. We're going to go fast over some parts of this because I have a fun little challenge for you at the end that I want to give you at least a couple minutes to do in class. That's like an optional fun thing that there's a prize. So here's what we're going to start with. At the top, there's a link that says Google Doc. We're going to go ahead and open that and make our own copy of it. And it should look like this. Something about a speech by President Wilson. I promise you we're not going to go through the whole thing, and we're not going to answer any of the questions on here. We're going to do the quick and dirty version. Nielsen, think before you talk, son. I hear everything that's uttered in this room.
I'm surprised you're not laughing.
I don't have sophomorish humor like you do.
Is there anything I need to catch up
We
on?
just finished what we did yesterday, which you are capable of doing on your own. If you have questions, ask. If you want to do highlight tape stuff, you can. If you got your own work, the choice is yours. But that's what I needed from you, and that was really helpful.
Alrighty. What class is that for?
That's U.S. history.
U.S. history?
We're doing the Cuban Missile Crisis like you're a CIA agent. It's pretty fun. Because the CIA unclassified all that stuff, so now we can use it. You can feel free to look through it if you want. So, let's talk timeline first. This war breaks out after the July crisis of 1914. That's Austria-Hungary giving Serbia those impossible demands. Serbia says yes to 9.5 out of 10, which means war. That's the false choice dilemma, right? Now, the war is going to start with Germany invading Belgium to sneak attack France, which pulls in the British. The Serbs go to war with Austria, which pulls in the Russians. So pretty much everybody's fighting within a month, except us. Now, one of the reasons for that is basic geography, right? You look at this map of the world, there's a little body of water called the Atlantic Ocean that separates us from all these knucklehead Europeans who are always fighting each other. Historically, that's been the thing that keeps us out of Europe's wars. That trend is going to change, and this isn't an American history class, but that trend is going to change after World War I. It's kind of like the first time you try a drug. The likelihood of you going back and using it again goes up exponentially after the first try. And that drug for America, if you know American history from the 20th century on, is war. We just can't stop. We can't put it down. We can't quit. Okay? Now, this is the first time we've really talked about America in this world history class. Quite frankly, we've only been relevant for one thing up to this point in history. That was our revolution. And honestly, the French Revolution had a bigger worldwide impact than ours. We're just kind of egotistical as Americans. So now we're finally relevant on the world stage. First question is, why did we stay out of the war until 1917? 3 years in, we're going to jump into the war and say, all right, now we're fighting. What's the deal, President Wilson in America? Why'd you guys stay out? Now, what better way to answer that question than to read a short excerpt from one of his speeches in 1914, okay, the month that everything went down in Europe? Here's what he told Congress. Why is he talking to Congress? If you know nothing about how our government works, please take this from our class. Presidents do not have the power to declare war. In our government, in our Constitution, who has the power to declare war?
Congress.
Yeah, more specifically the Senate. Okay, they deal with all foreign affairs like ratifying treaties and things like that. So the president is going to talk to Congress assembled and say, you guys, please declare war or don't. In 1914, here's what he tells Congress. The people of the United States are drawn from many nations, and chiefly from the nations now at war. Are there lots of Americans who trace their ancestry through France, Germany, Great Britain, Poland, Russia, Italy? Of course. It is natural and inevitable that some will wish one nation, others another, to succeed in the momentous struggle. AKA, everyone's cheering for their home country. Like all those German-American farmers in North Dakota want Germany to win. But all those British people who live on the East Coast are going to cheer for them to win. And he says that's normal and that's natural. Such divisions among us would be fatal to our peace of mind and might seriously stand in the way of our duty as one of the great nations at peace, the one nation ready to play a part of mediator and counselor of peace. What's a mediator?
Somebody like gets in the middle of a fight and just makes.
And throws punches at both sides?
No, like wants peace for both of them, like breaks it up.
Ah, so it's kind of like being the counselor. The two girls are mad because they each say naughty things on Facebook about each other. You come in the middle, you don't pick a side, you say, listen, let's talk, let's settle this. He says that should be our role. Okay, who's jamming out? Hill, is that you? You're jamming out on a book. Thank you. The United States must be neutral in fact as well as in name during these days that are to try men's souls. We must be impartial in thought as well as action. So why does Wilson say we should stay out of the war?
Because people root for different sides, and if they join one side over another,
And what should our role be in this conflict?
The nation full of peace.
Yep, be the middleman. The one that can talk to Germany and France and say, let's all get along. Now, if you scroll down, you see a second speech. Okay? I'm not going to read this to you. I get sick of speeches 3 times a day, even though I teach this stuff. So here's what I did. I took his full speech to Congress. All I want you to do you see the date at the bottom of this second speech?
Yeah.
That was given from this picture right here. Here's Woodrow Wilson, if you can see my mouse. He's standing here talking to Congress. Let me put his whole speech in one sentence. Dear Congress, please declare war on Germany. We're sick of those guys. Let's go fight them. Now, our big question is, what's changing that the same president who just said in 1914, stay out, we're mediators. We got to be the neutral ones here, to let's go to war. Something must have changed. Do we agree?
Yes.
He's not bipolar. Okay? Some circumstances have changed. So here's what I did, is I took his speech, and there's a bunch of different things you can use to do this. I don't know how well you guys can see this. So I put in a word cloud. So you guys have seen these. The words that show up more get bigger. So just from like a quick glance, here are some of the biggest things he talks about. All people, war, peace, Germany, right, because, only, against, without. Okay, and there's a bunch of other ones. I'm just saying those are the ones that jump out to me. Here's basically what he said. Germany keeps doing naughty things, antagonizing us. We can't take it anymore and sit on the sidelines, so let's go fight. That's basically what he says. Now, of course, we have to ask, what things is he talking about? Okay? So instead of reading that whole thing, let me show you. So, here's the first one. The Germans have their own sort of secret weapon in World War I. The British had the tank to start with. The Germans had their submarines, which they call, in German,
U-Boot.
Okay, say the whole thing though.
Unterseeboot.
Which literally means undersea boat. Just submarines. Okay, why are these such important weapons for the Germans? Because the British have the best navy in the world. They have all the way back for centuries. The first thing the British do is they blockade the Germans with their surface fleet, big battleships on top of the water, and they say, no German ships get in or out or we'll shoot you. Well, there's only one kind of boat that can get through a blockade, a U-boat. So the Germans really focus on those. In fact, their surface fleet, like their battleships, got into one real battle in 4 years. They pretty much sat in port and drank. That's all their sailors did, except the submarines. So what happened was, initially, the Germans would take their U-boats out and sink anybody they thought was sending supplies to their enemies. Now, I encourage you to be open-minded and think like a German this morning, because at first this is going to sound horrible and it's going to look bad, but they actually have a reason. Okay? This is the Lusitania. It's a passenger ship. It's full of civilians. Off the coast of Ireland in 1915, 2 German torpedoes hit the hull below the waterline, and in 15 minutes, this giant passenger ship sinks to the bottom of the English Channel. In 15 minutes. That's incredibly fast for a ship that big. Okay, some eyewitnesses said the hull split and it basically fell apart and sank. Over 1,000 civilians died. 120 or so of them American citizens. Now at first, does that look bad? German submarines just sank that ship and killed over 1,000 civilians? Does that look like a battleship with their guns on that or anything? But how does a ship that big sink that fast? That's not normal, 15 minutes.
Ammunition in it and blowing up.
Okay, but normally it would sit there and take on water and slowly sink over like the course of a day. At least a couple of hours. When Woodrow Wilson said we got to stay neutral, he meant don't send any guys in the military to go fight. But what has the United States been shipping across the Atlantic to the British and the French?
Supplies.
Supplies like
Ammunition.
guns, ammunition, vehicles. One of the leading theories, we don't know for sure, but we're pretty certain. In the storage hold below the waterline of the Lusitania were a bunch of armaments. Let's just say artillery shells, to be simple. That American factories built, we put on this ship, put a bunch of civilians on top of it, and said, go on vacation. The Germans sink it, and they say, we sunk that ship not to be cruel civilian killers, to stop those artillery shells from getting put in British guns and killing our soldiers tomorrow. So if you think like a German here for a minute, I know it's hard to do for all of us but one. Is the United States aiding your enemies by giving the British armaments to use against your men?
Yes.
Is it kind of makes sense then to sink ships like this?
Yeah.
Now, one of the big questions is, whose fault is this? And this is not the only example, it's just the most famous one. Let me tell you what the Germans would say. Okay, America and Britain, you take a bunch of armaments that are going to be used to kill German soldiers tomorrow and put 1,000 civilians sitting on top of them. Then we sink it and we're the bad guys. You guys are using human shields to make us look like the bad guys here. What's worse, using civilians as human shields to traffic arms
That's hard.
or to sink the ship and stop it from killing your own guys tomorrow?
That's tough.
There isn't a good answer. Welcome to history. If everything makes perfect sense, you're not thinking very hard. I can't say, but quite frankly, I'm kind of sympathetic to the Germans. Now, I don't agree with this, of course. But if you let those ships through, those are bombs and bullets and guns that are going to kill your men tomorrow. And you can't let someone do that. So when America says we're neutral in the sense that our soldiers aren't fighting there. But our bombs and bullets and munitions are getting shot at Germans every day. And doesn't it make sense for the Germans to try and stop those? I think so. Now, how does this get us to change our mind? Because this is 1915. The Germans started talking in 1917, saying, let's go back to sinking all ships that cross the Atlantic. Unrestricted submarine warfare. And we hear about this and go, oh man, you Germans, if you start that again, you're going to make us mad. We told you to knock it off. Okay? Besides U-boats. Question? Besides U-boats, there's a little political intrigue. Okay? The German foreign minister in Mexico gets a telegram. There's no Snapchat or Whisper or secret messaging app. There's just telegrams. And he gets a telegram that says, hey, go tell the Mexican government that if they sneak attack America right now in 1917, we'll help them out and give them Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California back, because the United States took those from the Mexicans in the 19th century. If they sneak attack America in 1917, here's what Germany's thinking. That ties America up with Mexico, keeps them out of our war. We'll win here. Mexico at least holds its own, and after the war, we'll carve up the United States and give Mexico all those states back that we took from them. Now, before you blame Mexico, because everybody blames Mexico for everything today, is it Mexico's fault that the Germans approached them with this offer?
No.
No. Okay, the Germans just basically were going to knock on their door and say, hey, Mexico, you want to sneak attack America in their Texas? That's what I call it, right? Instead of stabbing them in the back, stab them in their Texas. That's not Mexico's fault. They did not agree. They didn't go along with it. How do we know about this message? Because if you look at it, the way that it was actually received, that is the exact telegram sent by Western Union to the German foreign minister in Mexico City. Anybody read that?
Nope.
It's encoded. How the heck do we know what it says? Because the Germans aren't stupid. They're not going to like send a letter written out in perfect German, English, or Spanish saying, please sneak attack America, because we're going to read it. Or Mexico's going to show it to us, and Germany's going to look bad. How do you figure that out?
Or imagine each number represents.
You guys know what cryptography is?
No.
You basically make a code, and using the key, you can decode and encode messages. But if you make them complicated enough, we could give you this and give you guys like all year, you wouldn't break it unless you had the code, which is also called the cipher. Here's the code the Germans used. 2 numbers together equal 1 letter. So this would be like A, B, C, D. They put no spaces and no punctuation. So it just looks like these sets of random 4 letters. Okay? But if you have the cipher, you can figure it out. Thank you, British intelligence, because they're awesome at cracking codes, especially German codes, in both world wars. The British crack this code and call us up and say, hey, America, you might want to read what the Germans just told Mexico. And they sent us a copy of this. Okay? Now, at the end, I'm going to give you a chance to see if you can decode this. That's set up just like the real Zimmerman telegram. Okay, but I'm not going to give it to you till the end, because as soon as it's in your hand, you'll stop listening to me for the rest of the day and just do that. So that's coming. Now, do you see how these things are making us very angry with Germany? They're sinking our ships and talking about going back to unrestricted submarine warfare, and they're soliciting our neighbor to sneak attack us in our Texas. Bad Germany. We can't stay neutral if they're going to be fighting us while we sit on the sidelines. We might as well jump in and fight back. Do we agree? Here's the last reason. You look at the type of governments that both alliance systems have. It's not just a geographical alliance. The Triple Entente powers, France and Great Britain especially, are democratic, just like us. Their people have some say in their government. Unlike Germany, Austria, Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire, who essentially are empires. They have kings, Kaisers, or different names, but they're authoritarian. Their people have no say in their government. Woodrow Wilson said, we got to make the world safe for democracy. What hypocrites we would be if we joined the authoritarian powers. Let's go with the ones who match our system of government. Now, we'll surely ask you on Friday, what are 2 reasons why the U.S. tagged in and wanted to come fight in World War I? You have to explain them. So you can't just say, sinking of the Lusitania, unrestricted submarine warfare, and Zimmerman telegram. This because, this did that. Okay, and we'll see if you can do that at the end. Now, when the United States joins, here's the last question for the day. What impact do we really have on the war? Because everybody says we won World War I, right? So let me show you a couple things that might change your mind. Okay, here's the first one. Casualties by country at the end of the war, which is a mere 1 year after we tag in. Can you guys see those names?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is killed right here. The Russians have been getting slaughtered on the Eastern Front. And here's what's scary, people. They lead in deaths and total casualties by far. They actually quit the war the same year we joined, 1917. Russia quit. They didn't even fight the whole war. And they still lost the most people. In 1917, we declare war in April. Russia goes home. They quit because they're going to have a civil war and a revolution and come out of that the Soviet Union. The communist bad guys from the Cold War. They didn't even fight a whole war. Okay? That's because the Germans kicked the crap out of them on the Eastern Front for 3 years in a row. To the point where Russian soldiers would disobey commands and mutiny against their officers because they'd be like, hey, go attack the Germans. And like, no, we're all going to die. I'm not doing it. Meanwhile, people were starving at home, so it's kind of a mess. Now, these powers, we're not surprised to see Germany, France, Austria, Great Britain. Here's the United States. 126,000 deaths. Now, that's not the only way to measure your contribution to a war, but it's one of them. Compare that to Germany's 1.7 million deaths. Compare that to France's 1.3 million deaths. We're at 100,000. Did we do a lot of the fighting and dying in this war? No. We tagged in the last year. And I'm not saying that's insignificant, but that puts us between the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria. Not exactly like the preeminent world powers at the time, because we only fought in the last year. Now, our side is going to win, but it's not because we did a lot of fighting. Does that clearly establish that fact? Mm-hmm. We did not do a lot of fighting. The fighting that we did do was kind of a mixed basket. And this is one of my favorite questions, is how did our allies and enemies see American soldiers in World War I? They had been fighting in the trenches for 3 years. They knew all the rules, like you guys know from last week. Americans did not know those rules. Our army consisted of 60,000 men in 1914. That's nothing. We had a tiny army because we didn't normally fight wars. We had to draft about 4.5 million men to get an army to go fight, and they're almost all fresh. They're guys who were like mailmen and teachers and librarians, and all of a sudden you give them a gun and say, you're a Marine, you're a soldier. They're not experienced. And go fight Germans who've been fighting for 3 years kicking butt. Good luck. So, fun nicknames that Americans get. Does anyone know what they called American soldiers when we tagged in at the end of World War I? Because we were soft. Like, fresh, hadn't fought, clean-shaven, didn't know the rules.
Tim, we're all looking at you right now.
Doughboys. Doughboys. Now, people get confused. They're not saying we're fat because we eat donuts. That's America today. That's not America in 1914. It's because, like the Pillsbury Doughboy, like you poke him and he's like, ooh, and he's soft. Like, yeah, I'm not scared of him. He's weak. I've been killing British for 3 years and you just joined the American Army. Not scared of you. So initially, Americans are called doughboys. At the Battle of Belleau Wood in 1917, Germans face off against American Marines. Okay, that's the Marine Corps logo right there on the bulldog. That's the German wiener dog with the little Kaiser helm. And according to legend, at least, the Germans give Marines a nickname that sticks today. It's one of the most famous nicknames for Marines. Can you say that in German, please?
Teufelhunde.
Which means hounds from hell. And have you ever heard Marines referred to as devil dogs? Like if you watch movies or talk to a Marine, the next time you see one, some of you know a few, ask them if you know how the Marine Corps got that nickname. The Germans were so impressed with the tenacity of American Marines, they called them devil dogs. Now, if you know Marines, they have big egos. They think they're the baddest, the toughest. So like, oh yeah, we'll call ourselves that now. But they got that nickname from German soldiers. And if you read accounts of Germans who faced Americans, they'd always say, what kind of fighters are they? And a common response is basically this. We're not sure if they're really stupid or really brave, but those Americans are crazy.
Okay, now think about those rules of trench warfare. Are they kind of unique? Like, did you know that stuff until last week? Probably not. Throw a bunch of Americans into that mix, fighting grizzled veteran Germans who've done it for 3 years. Americans don't know all the rules, and they break them. Is it partially stupidity? Yes. Is it partially bravery? Of course. Okay? Kind of like John Wayne movies. They were just courageous to the point that you could probably call it stupid. But we didn't do a lot of the fighting and dying. So that doesn't answer the question of what effect did we have on the outcome of the war. Here's the first one. All of these countries have been fighting for 3.5 years. They're tired. They're running out of money. They're running out of bullets. They're running out of men. We just tagged in. It's a fresh body who's excited to fight. We're mad about the submarine warfare in the Zimmerman telegram. We're the only fresh country in the war in 1917. That's an advantage to our allies. Probably the biggest one is our factories and natural resources. The Germans are running out of materials to make guns. They're running out of men. We haven't even started yet. Our factories that made cars and refrigerators and consumer goods, we're going to retool them and say, you make rifles, you make tanks, you make aircraft, you make ships, and start cranking them out in huge numbers. Meanwhile, German artillery is running out of shells, and the ones they have are warping the barrels, and we have all these fresh factories and supplies. The Germans know if this war goes on, we're going to lose. So they do one giant last offensive in 1917 called Operation Michael, and say, we got to win before America shows up or we're screwed. And they lose. So the way that I like to explain it is like the physics concept. Some of you will know this. What kind of energy does this book have right now?
Potential.
Potential energy. You have common sense, right? You see the book above your head. What happens when it drops? It starts going faster because it's in the air, and it hurts your head. I'm not going to drop it on you. This is how Germany sees us. We are like a big textbook that doesn't necessarily come in and kick butt. We don't. But it's hanging over your head. And if and when it drops all the way, you know it's going to hurt, and you're going to lose. So I like to think of it as the potential energy. Okay, compare that to the potential energy if it's on the desk. Is that going to hurt as bad? No. Compare it to the potential energy from here. That's not going to hurt. With our fresh troops, our good morale, our factories, and we're coming, Germany, if you let this war drag on, you're going to lose. Does that make sense? Now, did we drop the hammer on Germany, so to speak? No, we didn't have to. Because the potential energy told the Germans, I know I always point at you when I say the Germans, I apologize. You're going to lose in the long run. So by the end of 1918, we're going to sign an armistice, and the war is going to be over for all intents and purposes. Okay? So we will ask you on Friday, and I want you to pick 2 of these and 2 of these. All we're going to do is put them on the top of your Google Doc. And since we didn't read all of his speeches, we're not going to answer the questions, but we are going to turn that Google Doc in. So be sure you can answer a short answer question Friday. What are 2 reasons why the U.S. tagged into World War I? That you can explain and say why. And what impact did we have on the outcome? Did we go in and kick everybody's butt with our awesome troops? No. But they were fresh, well supplied. We had some awesome factories and natural resources, and the potential energy was enough to get Germany to surrender. We didn't even push the Germans back to Germany. When they signed the armistice, most German soldiers are still sitting in trenches in France. That was a mistake on our part. No offense, but we should have killed more Germans and pushed them back further, right? When you pick 2, I want you to turn to one of your partners and pretend you're answering this question on a short answer test tomorrow, Friday. And say, okay, unrestricted submarine warfare. How did that pull us into World War I? Can you explain in a sentence? If you cannot, your partner will help you. If they cannot help, I will clarify. Because you have to explain 2 of these and explain the impact we had on the war. Now, when we're all done with this and the 2-minute warning rings, I'll give you your little challenge for the day.